and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Manus. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching, and you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com. In the last episode about tactical personality, we talked about certain traits that we have seen, that Mike and I have seen in successful folks in the military and law enforcement and the competition and self-defense communities, right? Those traits, things like coachability, your competitive drive, and even some like obsessive attention to detail, some dominance, some confidence to hold your own. Those are important. And we talked about getting the levels of those traits right and managing your personality traits so you're not awful to work with, right? That was a good start. In this installment, let's talk about the mix of people you need in a high functioning team. You don't want little clones. You know, if everyone is exactly the same, you're not really getting a team. You're getting like the Chinese army, right? And this is going to sound squishy, but you actually need some diversity. And I'm not saying you need like one of each ethnic background, although that can help. What I'm saying is you need a couple different types of personalities in a team for it to work. And they don't always have to be the stereotypes that you see in like movies and stuff like that. You know, Ocean's 11 or A-Team. It's fun if they are, but when you're picking a team, that's your chance to figure out, you know, I want some of this and I want some of that, and I need more of this and less of that, right? So team building is an important thing, and you don't always get much say in who's on your team. Sometimes your team gets handed to you, and you don't always get to decide how much resources you have, how many resources you have to recruit certain talent, right? You get the budget you get. You can offer only so much money. You'll only have so much time to work on your recruiting. But when you can, you need to think about the makeup of your team. And to the extent you get a say, you need to take your say, right? You also need to understand what you are doing to contribute to the group's collective personality, you as a member of the team. And you might need to adjust some of your traits to help your team rise to the occasion. Self-awareness is a big deal. You gotta know yourself. You gotta know what you bring to that team. You need to know your strengths. You need to know your weaknesses, and you need to know when to apply certain traits of your personality to help the group achieve something.
And what comes with that is also some acceptance and leeway for the things that are going to drive you crazy about some of your teammates or your bosses at times.
Oh, yeah.
Because the same things that might drive you crazy might be what they contribute, or they might be overshadowed by the things that they contribute. There might be something that they do that just drives you nuts. They just piss you off, but their other strengths make it worth the squeeze for that sense.
I like that. So what do you want on your team? You want winners, right? Well, no shit. Of course you want winners. But
super helpful.
There's more to it than that, right? There are certain patterns and models that stand out to us. And anytime we put labels on people, and I'm going to use a bunch of labels in the course of this episode, we are oversimplifying people, right? People are complicated, dynamic little snowflakes. And sometimes we need to apply a model in order to understand them. And that's okay as long as you do it on purpose and you don't follow those labels off a cliff. Like, oh, Mike's an ESTJ and he'll only ever be an ESTJ. So that's all I can do with him, right? Or Mike's an extrovert or whatever. So don't follow those off a cliff. People change and people adapt to their surroundings and situation. But labels like this are a model. They're a model of reality. They help us comprehend complicated people and complex relationships, but they're just models. There's a saying about models and modeling, like complex system modeling. All models are wrong, but some models are useful. I'll give you some examples. And these are not a set list. These are just some things that popped into my head over the course of my career of types of people I deal with and trends among the people I deal with, right? I deal with a lot of process people and a lot of results people. I deal with optimizers and satisficers. I deal with sprinters and I deal with marathoners. And some of them are like the little turtle that might eventually win the race. I deal with young and old. And that not necessarily like an age thing. Age is just a number after all.
But experience.
But, experiencing kind of like old souls, young souls, that kind of thing. There's definitely a healthy tension in certain parts of the military between compliance people and rebellious people. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode about personality, but it comes up in this context with risk-comfortable people and risk-averse people. You don't want to share a foxhole with someone braver than you are. And you don't want a team of all pansies or a team of all psychos. You need a little mix, right? That helps you get a healthy arrangement.
So you'll notice in a lot of these things, we're talking about opposites in some sense. And what you have to understand is that with any distribution of people, and I want to use the example of young and old that we talked about, you're going to have a distribution of people on either end of those spectrums, right? The bulk of the people are going to be in the middle, and then you have some outliers on the fringes. And what's important to understand about that is having balance in your team. For example, I worked in a unit for a period of time where I was the guy who had all kinds of new ideas and wanted to try all these things. And I was surrounded by people who were just super old school and stuck in their ways in certain contexts. And that allows us to find balance in the group, right? If some people are resistant to change and other people are too willing to change, then you can find some happy medium where, evolution still occurs, but maybe not at the pace that, makes it inconsistent. So in all of these things, you're going to have that distribution. It's not one or the other. And that's one of the key things that we're going to talk about in understanding this stuff is there's trade-offs and there's a balance and there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of understanding the nuance in what we're talking about here, right?
Oh, yeah. So to go back through that list, process people and results people. In things like the military and law enforcement, there are processes, there are procedures that you have to follow in order to get to an end result. And sometimes those processes are set for you by Congress or the commander.
Just as one example.
We got some rules around here. You gotta fill out an ID 10T form in order to get your bucket of jet wash, right? There's a process you follow in order to get the things you need. And there's some organizations, particularly in the military, that they kind of just live for the process. They act an awful lot like they don't really care if the result happens or not. They care that the process got followed, right? And then you have some people all over the place, and especially in the military, who don't care about the process, not even a little bit.
And it's either the outcome is either success or failure, right? Like and on some level, both matter.
And sometimes you don't get a choice, right? You have to follow the process because it's the law, or it's going to keep you out of dying, grave bodily injury.
Well, and that's a great. So in terms of results, though, that's a perfect example of surviving something, right? You're talking about zero fail circumstances in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to follow the process in order to get paid, to get your travel voucher paid. Like there's only one way to get the pay, right? On the other hand, if all you have are process people, often they can get so wrapped up in the process that you don't end up getting the results that you need. You need a couple people who are willing to fight the process or change the process in order to get the results they need, right? Or sidestep it or get a waiver or an exception to it. I have written above my desk at work the phrase, the tyranny of process. That sometimes we get so wrapped up in process and compliance that we forget our mission. And that's a problem. So you have to balance that. You have to balance following a process with getting results. And one of the things that I've learned over the course of my career is some people are much better at following processes. Some people just aren't. Well, you need a mix. You need people who can build a process, understand a process, and lead others through a process. It's great that the finance guy can fill out the forms and get himself paid. You need the guy who can get the knuckle-dragging SWAT operator through the forms to get his travel voucher paid, right? So when you're hiring for people, find the people who can follow a process when they need to, who can recognize when the process is failing them and are willing to either sidestep or change the process until they get the results they need. But if you hire only results people, they're going to really struggle when it comes time to do process, or they can get you shut down from a risk management perspective. They can get you shut down from a security compliance perspective. And at some point, in a lot of our communities, you just got to follow. There's some rules you just got to follow, right? So hiring a mix, I think, will help you. And recognize when you need to make some adjustments on, maybe right now I need to just follow the dang process. I just need to shut up and color, right? Or recognize, hey, this isn't working. Let's fix it. Mike, do you have any experiences with this, with people who are super processy or super resultsy?
You could argue that I'm pretty process oriented, and I think it's important because it helps you engineer good outcomes, right? Like, because the thing about the results is at the point that you have results, they're in the past. So you can examine those and try to figure out what went right or wrong in the process that led you there. But like we said, we're a hostage rescue. Like that's a zero fail operation. You know, if you're going to do something like that, like you need to make it successful. So something along those lines, you do have to experience both, you know, and that's, I think, something to be said about training. So I would say the entire team that I work around, and as far as like specialized units go, kind of inherently understands that. That's why we're so hard on the details, because we've experienced failures and we take those to heart. And we've also, both in real life and in training, by the way, not just in training, also in real life. So there's plenty of lessons written in blood, and I think that speaks to anyone in law enforcement or the military or whatever. So we've experienced those failures and we understand and we can wrap our heads around that, but we also have, you know, used that to go back to the process. And I think where I see this the most is like in groups like SWAT. We're very good at that. And it's culturally unpopular among like the masses, right? Conventional law enforcement, sometimes a lot of people don't have the attention span for process. And so they're stuck at results. So, yeah, I mean, I've experienced a lot of that.
That's actually a good point. This is actually a joke between Mike and me. Mike tends to be very processy, and I tend to be compulsively results-oriented. And where that kills me is things like staying on a diet, staying on a workout program. I won't do it because I don't get immediate drastic results. And Mike is like, no, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to do this keto thing, or I'm going to do this
macros
CrossFit thing.
Right now,
whatever.
it's macros. Count
Macros.
Yep.
He finds a process and he's like, I'm going to follow this process and see where it goes. And I'm like, I'm going to give this process exactly 3 seconds and I'm going to go back to eating my Cheetos because I didn't get the results I wanted, right? So there's a patience aspect to this, right? And you need both. Another kind of category is optimizers and satisficers. And I stole this from like a business review article, that there are people who are always trying to make the system better, right? They see a process, for example, and they're like, what if we made some tweaks here? What if we adjusted this and swapped out this and changed how we do this? And we might be able to get maybe 10% better performance. Well, that's a worthy goal, right? The problem with that is at some point you just have to be satisfied with what you got and drive, right?
Right.
Sometimes when you're an EMS crew and you're working on someone who's injured, you could put in the perfect IV and the perfect crike. Or what the guy really needs is diesel. You throw him in the back of the truck and you go and you get him to the ER or the ED, right? We've talked about this. And so knowing when it's time to make adjustments and fix how we do business and come up with a better way of doing business, sometimes you need that. But sometimes you need the judgment to say, you know what? It's good enough. Let's go. There's this guy, General George Smith Patton Jr.
Might have heard of him. Yeah.
Big guy in World War II. He was fond of saying, a good plan executed violently now is better than a perfect plan next week. And so understanding sometimes there's value in violence of action. Just do it, right? And in the cockpit, I have smart people on my crew. They are compulsive problem solvers. They're always trying to come up with a better way of doing things. And so we tend to be very democratic on the crew. We'll talk through a problem, come up with a solution, a course of action. We're going to do it. One of the things that drives me nuts is we'll be halfway through executing that, and someone on the crew will be like, but wait, I have a better idea.
Good idea, Ferry.
And I'm like, I'm going to shoot your good idea, Ferry, because we're landing, right? And so you got to kind of read the room and read the situation. When is it time to jump up with a good idea, Ferry? And when is it time to say, hey, we're good enough, let's go? And that's tricky. Think about, like, when they were getting ready to do the Iran hostage rescue, how many times had they rehearsed it? And they had rehearsed pieces of it for a very long time, but they hadn't gotten a chance to do big rehearsals, right? And that was a critical problem for them.
It's one of the huge lessons learned in that event.
Yeah, but imagine you're the key decision maker. You're the president making like the green light call. How many rehearsals is enough? And it's easy to say, oh, more. Well, at some point, you just got
to go do the mission, though.
The hostages die of old age. Did that get you anything? Right? So at some point, you just got to go. And this is one of those tricky things. It comes with experience and wisdom. And sometimes it's just gut. Hey, we have to go right now. Right? So optimizers and satisficers, you need both. People who are always going to just run with the 80% solution get you contraptions that are very obviously the 80% solution. That's not always good, especially when we're talking about airplane design. So, sometimes you need to get that shit right.
I'd like to 100% land.
Yes. Another category, and the next two categories are kind of related. You got sprinters and marathoners, and you have young and old, right? And like I said, it's not necessarily an age thing, but just kind of the energy. Mike and I used to do a lot of volunteer work with the Civil Air Patrol cadet program, helping high school kids pursue career development and aviation exploration. And there are definitely quite a few people in the Civil Air Patrol who are long haul members. They've been around for 30 years, 40 years.
Or more.
They had Orville and Wilbur Wright as cadets, and they're still around, and they're important. We need that institutional knowledge. We need someone who will show up and turn the lights on for the kids and unlock the building.
All that.
but they bring a certain energy. And more importantly, they bring a certain lack of energy. It's been my experience. So sometimes you need the Jim and the Mike show to show up. And we come in like a hurricane or a wrecking ball.
And as far as self-awareness goes, just to be clear, like, we're a bit much.
Yeah. And we know that, right?
We acknowledge that. So you can't have us in your program all the time. First of all, we don't have the time for it. And second, it would just be too much to handle, for sure.
Yeah. So, but we can take a week or two off during our summer and run a program, a real high energy program, and then disappear, right? And so we could come in and sprint and inject a whole bunch of energy into the program. I see this in the military. Sometimes you got the guys who are like, this is the number one project right now. We need someone who will run this across the finish line. You take it and go, right? And you need those people who can inject a whole bunch of energy and make a bunch of phone calls, and they're kind of the busy bee, right? And then once that process is built, you need someone who can own that process over the long run. Sometimes that's often one of the older cats, right? One of the civil service civilians. I'm not sure in law enforcement who fits that category, but the people who can take it and manage it over the long run. And those are often different types of people, right? You need a mix. You need the guys who can sprint, and you need the guys who can carry it through in the long run. With young and old, sometimes it is an age and experience thing. You need the guys who've been around for a while, who have seen all the ways it could go wrong, right? And sometimes you need the young, fresh ideas and the fresh look and the comfort with technology. Like, does anyone who listens to this think technology is going away? Like, just as an example, you're listening to a podcast. I distinctly remember Mike saying, Jim, I need you to listen to a podcast. And I'm like, what the fuck is a podcast? That was pretty recent, if we're being honest. But you need those people who aren't going to have to think about how to interact with the drone. They just know, right? Because they've been playing video games since they were in utero.
Well, and our newest bomb robots and stuff use literally like an Xbox controller. I mean, that's how you actually drive our newest bomb robot is an Xbox controller. So the other thing that I think fits in here in terms of age and experience and just generational stuff, I've also seen education play a role in this.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got people who have a lot of life experience, but haven't done a lot of like schooling, right? And the most common one that I think of is like mechanics. Sometimes they go to a trade school and they understand the ins and outs of working on a car or an engine or something to a level that most people would never, and in terms of results and process, I mean, the car needs to run, it needs to operate, right? Like, so you can't just study your way through that problem. You have to actually fix it is the goal. So on the other hand, there's people who they're well educated, they're very, very smart, but they've been a student their entire life, right? Like we
call them officers.
but there's a dichotomy in that as well, because, and this is, I mean, really it's part of the NCO and officer corps in the military, right? Like,
yeah.
But this is important because they balance each other out in some sense. You need the research and, higher level of education and critical thinking. All those things are important, but you also need the doers that can tinker with things and make it work, right? There's just a different kind of...
And the practical experience, the having gone to the school of hard knocks thing, you do need that. I have a story about that. One time I was bringing an airplane from Afghanistan back to the U.S., so it was a long series of flights in that airplane. And my flying buddy was an engineering major at the Air Force Academy, and he understood engineering. But he had a hard time following processes. But he understood the concepts and the math that was an airplane. And anytime we had to troubleshoot anything, which happens airplanes break, pieces break. We got to figure out what we're going to do about it. His approach was so backwards from anybody else. He just couldn't function. And the example I would use is, if your car doesn't start, you probably have a list of things you're going to do. If your car doesn't start, you're going to maybe try it again. Maybe check the battery. Maybe make sure you got a gas tank that's full. Maybe you get a jump. And if the jump doesn't work, then it's something else, right? You have your list of things you will do to troubleshoot the car. This guy, if his car didn't start, he would start by taking off the upholstery. And then he would take off the hubcaps. And then he would take off the catalytic converter. And then he would take off the headlights. And then he would realize he never put the key in the ignition. Just a totally different approach to processes and troubleshooting. But man, he was a smart guy, very educated engineer.
Very, very squared away.
Very squared away. Process, results.
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com.
Another category, and you'll notice these are all a little bit related. That's okay. Is you have compliance people who are naturally obedient, and you have naturally rebellious people. Yeah, that's a spectrum. You have people who are very, very rebellious, so rebellious they can't function in society.
Total anarchy, yeah.
Criminals. And on the other side, you have like super duper straight laced.
I can't do that because the rules say, and the rules are the rules, and those are the rules.
The rules are good because they're the rules, right? And we, the military and in law enforcement, tend to attract people on one side of that spectrum. And then in training, we encourage that, right? We encourage compliance very firmly. In basic training, we encourage compliance. And that's fine, but there are times when the rules don't apply all that well, right? Or the rules are simply wrong. And it kind of goes back to the process thing, right? If the process is broken, fix the process. And you need to have the judgment to know there are certain rules you have to follow. Some rules were written in blood. You got to do it. And some rules you don't have to follow. When I went to the Air Force Academy, we had rules that said you have to walk upstairs with your hand on the handrail and you have to put your foot on every step. That was an actual rule that was written down at the Air Force Academy. There were rules that govern how many knickknacks you could have on your desk. Yeah, maybe that's not that big of a deal that we follow that rule, right? There were so many rules. Yeah, there were so many rules that people just didn't follow any of them, and that wasn't real helpful either, right? But there was this guy named Charlie Beckwith. He was one of the founders of the Army's special operations endeavors, and one of his sayings was, you have to know the rules in order to break them. And I think that's an important part of like tactical maturity, is understanding that it's not just about breaking rules. It's about understanding the rules so well that you know when they apply, how they apply, when they don't apply, and when you need to straight break them.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're doing that blindly, you're not helping anything. All you're doing is being a little rebel. And sometimes you can get away with that. You can get away with not wearing your seatbelt right up until the car crash, right? So you need to know the rules in order to break them. And that's what we're hiring for in really any sensitive job. We want people with that level of judgment, right? So compliance versus rebellious. You need people who aren't going to follow the rules off the cliff, but they do have to have the maturity to understand the rules. One of my other favorite sayings about special ops stuff is special ops is not about just doing the weird stuff, the crazy stuff. It's about getting the fundamentals right, even when the situation gets weird. And that fundamentals, that's the rules. There's a certain way that you hold the gun. There's a certain way you pull a trigger. There's a certain way you breathe when you're doing that. And you better follow those rules, because when everything gets really, really ugly and you're injured and you're TBI'd and you're still trying to fight your way out of the ambush, that's not a good time to get creative. That's when you need to fall down to the level of your training and do what the hell you were taught, right? Another category, and we talked about this, like I said in previous episodes, is risk comfort, right? You have risk comfortable people and you have very, very risk averse people. Again, it's a spectrum. These all are, but you need at least some people who are comfortable with, we're taking a risk. Yeah, we're good enough.
This is dangerous work. Yeah,
this is dangerous work. And if they don't get that it's dangerous work, they're probably not aware enough to be doing it or mature enough to be doing it, right? On the other hand, if they're so comfortable with it that it doesn't faze them, that should probably also stand out to you, right? And risk averse, same thing. You need people who are careful. If you're doing parachuting, you need people who aren't just blasé about the parachute, right?
Let's go ahead and pack those well, thanks.
Yeah, they need to be conscious and a little bit OCD about following those procedures, about making sure that stuff is correct, right? Knowing when to be careful and when to just go. When does the juice justify the squeeze, right? And that's most of what we talk about on Tactical Tangents, is like the risk management and sorting that out. So you'll notice with all these, they're all kind of opposing, right? They're all spectrums, but at the end of the day, there's kind of a tension between each of those sides of the spectrum. And they're all kind of interrelated, right? Process and compliance, they have a lot to do with each other. Youth and experience and energy and sprinting and marathoning have a lot to do with each other. As you can see my running scores, you know, I'm getting old, right?
Right.
But they're all kind of interrelated.
And that's the beauty in understanding a dichotomy, right? The beauty
There's
in
an
this
SAT word. I like it.
the beauty.
Did you go to college?
Yeah, no, I'm just a stupid cop. Just knuckle dragging police. But it's finding this middle ground. And if you understand how opposing some of these ideas are, then I think that helps you cognitively separate the two and process that. So you can recognize the pros and cons of each one and figure out where in that mix you want to be. Like for this situation, in this context, for this rule, for this process, for this result, what's the acceptable degree of risk? And all of that being interrelated like that is something that you can bring to bear in your understanding of whatever it is. So I think it's an important critical thinking point, and that's why, obviously why we're talking about it, but it's in all of that you start to figure out all the nuance, and you can fine tune what seem like opposing ideas into a compatible thought that is unique to your situation or your team or your group or whatever.
Yeah. You need the right personality for the moment. And that means you need to read the situation. You need to read the people around you, right? And adjust your levels based on it. And if you're hiring a team, you need to kind of read the team and read the mission and figure out what kinds of people you need in that mission, right? Self-awareness, social awareness, group awareness are superpowers. And I don't say that lightly. They really are. This is a big deal. And we can do a lot with someone who's self-aware and dynamic enough that they can adjust their own levels. So one look at this is like, we talked about compliant and rebellious. In basic training in the police academy, we teach guys to be kind of black and white. That's on purpose, right? It either meets the standard or it doesn't. Your bed is made or it isn't. Chow is at 6:30 to 0700 every morning, and then it's not. But in things like special operations or counterinsurgency, or I don't know, in law enforcement, maybe undercover work or something like that, community engagement sometimes. You got to know what rules you have to enforce right that second and what rules, maybe you don't, right?
It's discretion.
Yeah.
Which is a whole part of this, right?
Oh, yeah. You need to be able to work in the gray. You need to be able to apply common sense and good judgment and discretion. You need to be comfortable in nuance and uncertainty and even some chaos, because those are the trade spaces of discretionary warfare. And I say warfare with a big W. We could be talking about downtown Denver.
Thematically, right? Like,
yeah.
Public safety in general, like war, conflict in general.
Yeah. Or we could be talking about Fallujah in 2005, right? Either way, you have to be able to work in this kind of chaotic environment, and you have to be dynamic enough to adjust yourself, right? And if I have to tell you what time to brush your teeth and shave every morning, you're probably not useful in that environment.
It's going to be a little...
If you're so rigid, if you're so black and white that you have to be handed a procedure that tells you when to get out of bed in order to make it to work on time, maybe you're better off, at staying in basic training for the rest of your life. But if you want to play with the big boys, this is the big boy stuff, right?
Yeah. There's a good example of this in the movie Black Hawk Down. If you see the scenes where you've got like the uniformed Army Ranger guys that are very, uniforms are all pressed and they're all squared away, and then there's the plainclothes bearded guys that are kind of just they look a lot more relaxed, and there's some
the ninjas, if you will.
The ninjas, yeah. There's some interactions between those dudes, and the plainclothes guys with that are unshaven and kind of messy are kind of shunned by the commanders of the Rangers, right? They think they're just sloppy and undisciplined mavericks, and there's a lot of good reasons that the Rangers are more, regimented. See what I did there? And the other guys are more relaxed. And if you think about that mission and the things that either of those players did, the movie will portray that well enough. But if you read the book Black Hawk Down, you'll understand even better. You'll see why both played such a key role in that entire operation, right? Especially when things went sideways.
Yeah. And kind of going into that example with Rangers and fancy Army guys or fancy Navy guys, whatever. One of the things that traditionally kind of separates how we think of Rangers versus how we think of like SEALs is exactly that. Rangers tend to be very, very procedural, right? They have a task and a purpose and a mission statement, and they're going to do their op ward a certain way, and they're going to do a rehearsal of concept drill, and they'll get up and do, incredibly detailed planning. And I think they would tell you, and I don't want to speak for them, I'm not one of them, but I think for the most part, the ones that I've worked with would tell you that level of planning is what allows them to handle when the situation gets weird, right? They would tell you it's not the plan, it's the planning. It's the fact that they have thought through all of those details and all of those contingencies, and that they have the discipline to follow orders and not break ranks, figuratively break ranks, when the shit hits the fan, right? Whereas SEALs tend to be a lot more dynamic. Yeah, well, we'll do it live. But bear in mind, SEALs have a little bit of different culture. They have a slightly different mission. And they often are planning to go into something that is going to go sideways, that is going to be live. And so they hire for that, right? And even you're going to find, follow certain procedures very carefully, right? There's only so many ways you can get a little mini sub out of a big submarine without drowning. So you got to follow those rules, or you're going to be one with the ocean, Davy Jones's locker or whatever, right? And you're going to find in any of those environments, a guy who can't follow rules is useless and dangerous, and they don't want them. And we have stories about Air Force pilots who couldn't follow rules and were dangerous, right? And then one of the classic ones is a book called Warnings Unheeded by Andy Brown about a B-52 crash, among other things. I recommend it.
And we've had Andy Brown on the podcast, so make sure you go check out that episode. I don't have the number, but it's an earlier episode, probably in the first, 20 or 30 episodes, something like that. So the key in this, as far as the Rangers and SEALs example goes, is understanding that they both have roles that they play, but more importantly, figuring out which purpose either is better suited for. And where that brings us is all of this stuff is a leadership problem at the end of the day, or maybe we should say a leadership challenge. It's not that it's a leadership problem. Nothing has gone wrong, but this is one of the challenges of good leadership. You need the right guys or gals to lead any given group, and then you need the right guys and gals in that group. And this becomes a really complicated math problem when you understand that you can compensate a little bit for one side of that equation or the other. You can have really good leaders. You can have really strong team members, right? Ideally, you have both, but good members of a team can make their bosses look good, their lesser bosses look good, and strong leaders can guide and steer and shape lesser groups into something better, right? So when we talk about on the show, thinking in terms of people, ideas, hardware in that order, this is why we make such a big deal of it, because those higher level leaders, higher level commanders need to focus a lot of their efforts on engineering successful teams and not making it just, throw some people at a problem and that's it, right? You need to spend a lot more energy not looking at the line item on the budget for the next new widget, but more specifically looking at what does this team need to accomplish? What people, whatever. That is a huge task of any leader. And if you're spending more of your time buying the latest tech and not doing that, you're probably selling yourself short somewhere. So along those lines, if you find yourself in one of these groups that maybe things are going really well or things are not, what you have to understand is there's always going to be mismatches because experience changes and increases. There's turnover. There's always going to be some mismatch in people that fit and don't fit. And those are adjustments often that have to be made, whether that, these are the personnel problems, right? Does someone need to be disciplined? Does someone need to be taken behind the shed and had a talking to? Do they need stronger mentors? I mean, all of this stuff is so complex, but it's so important. And, if you think about how you make your contribution as a member of that group, it's trying to frame your whole attitude around it, around this stuff and saying that all right, people are people. They're not no one's perfect, right? Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, like we've been saying, but what does this group need for this situation? And, in mine and Jim's case, this podcast, I mean, we complement each other very well, but like we've talked about, we're very different in a lot of ways, but it's because we are unified by this common purpose, this common goal in what our mission is with this project, we're able to take those differences, right, and complement each other well. And it gives us this sort of synergy that hopefully makes it successful and useful for you guys. So with that, don't have a shitty attitude. We've talked about this in one of our leadership episodes that we did, and your attitude is contagious. And it's really easy to get frustrated with people in your team or with your bosses, because bosses, people assume that this guy's my boss, and so he or she should have leadership all figured out. No, this is hard stuff, right? So you have to make sure that you kind of are gracious about that, I think, and that you try to just consider how complex some of this stuff can be.
Yeah, I think Mike made a really good point about how this is so fundamentally a leadership thing. And I would just go back to kind of those pairings and give you some examples of how a good leader can manage that well, right? As a leader, you might be thinking what do I need to tell my guys? How do I keep them motivated? How do I keep them on task? How do I, share my vision with them? That's great. That's cool. That's like day one leadership school stuff. This is the stuff that, in my experience, your guys probably need to hear from you. They need to hear, hey, we are comfortable with this process. We have built this process. This process was written in blood. Follow the goddamn process. Or they need to hear, this process isn't working out for us, in my judgment as the boss, and I'm okay with deviating from it. They need to hear that from you. They need to see when you're willing to deviate and when you're not, because they're trying to figure out whether they can, whether you're going to cut their head off for deviating, right? Optimizers and satisficers. Someone has to make the call that we're good enough to go. That's you. You're the boss. That's the team leader. That's whoever is giving the green light for the operation, the go, no-go authority or the target engagement authority. Yeah, we've got enough information. This is our bad guy. Let's drop a hellfire on him. Well, that's why they pay you the big bucks, right? Sprinters and marathoners. I need to know as a follower whether you need me in a sprint right now or not. And if I'm always in a sprint, you will burn me out and I will go home.
Yep.
Right. And you will not manage your talent well if every freaking week we're in a new sprint. Now, there are organizations that are all about that, but they burn write them hard, put them away wet.
Yeah.
Marine Corps
a lot of turnover.
For 2 to 4 years, and that's it. Right.
Yep.
Speaking of young and old, are the young guys welcome in your organization? Are the old guys welcome in your organization? Or are you only giving it, and appreciating? Are you only giving kudos to the new hotness? Because I'll tell you what, a lot of leaders, a lot of types of the people we hire as leaders tend to bite off on whoever the shiny star is. And you need some shiny stars, but you also need the guy who's going to get the lights turned on, right? The compliance and rebellious. This is huge as far as leadership goes, is your guys need to know what rules you will enforce and when you will enforce them. And is there a double standard? Do officers get different treatment from the enlisted guys or not? Do you hold yourself to the same standard or not? If you screw up a landing, are you going to downgrade yourself? Right? And what is your risk tolerance? Don't make me guess. As a follower, don't make me guess whether you're going to back me up for accepting a risk on your behalf. I should have a sense of that, right? I should understand your intent. These are the intent things that you can really help kind of build and shape and create that implicit guidance and control in your team. It starts with how you hire people and also what you tell them when you hire them. Hey, we are looking for this type of guy. Are you it? Because I'll tell you, I can follow a process, but I'm not going to follow it off a cliff. And if you're looking for that guy, and there are jobs where I need that. We talked about this in the past, like a nuclear missile crew, an ICBM crew. I do not want them getting like creative with whether they're going to turn the keys on the launch code or not, right? I want them to follow the freaking rules. But there are some communities, less so. I need you to be a little bit more squishy, right? So make that clear when you do the hiring. Make it clear when you do that day one brief. Hey, this is what I will tolerate. This is what I will not tolerate. And that's got to be more than like, we are zero tolerance for, sexual harassment and assault and, counter diversity stuff. I need more than that. I need to know operationally what your left and rights are, right? This is how you get that. Mike, what you got?
I think we've covered it pretty well. I think I want to go back to that normal distribution of people thing, and not necessarily in terms of those opposing ideas so much as understanding that in any group of people, you are going to have outliers. And the outliers can be the people who hold you back, or they can be the people who help you move forward. And so you have to, in terms of like managing talent, like Jim said, I think you need to be very, very deliberate about what you do with that. And, fostering teams where everyone feels like they have a voice and they have a say and that they're appreciated, even if they're that guy. Like, you need to let the crazy guy talk sometimes. And that goes, the old guy that's stuck in his ways, you need to let him talk too, because he might be stuck for a good reason on some of those things. So let the crazy, let the old, let them talk. Give them a voice. That's a big part of having a team. And like Jim mentioned, in terms of the boss making sure that his left and right limits are clear, and you being willing to speak up to your boss if there's something that you need or you want to address, that is an important part of the culture that you want in one of these groups to be successful. So that's all I got.
Be safe out there. Be smart out there. We're cheering you on.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.